All right. No themes here. We just wanted to put two awesome movies against each other. And this is actually one that I've been wanting to do for a while. So we're finally going to see what happens when the Guy Ritchie battle gets really bloody as Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels battle Snatch. Take it away, AJ.
Yeah. This one was chosen totally at random.
Oh, yeah. So will next week's.
Normally I say why I'm comparing them. I can probably just start.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're going to start with Lock, Stock.
Okay.
Lock, Stock was obviously the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like it was the first movie ever of like Vinnie Jones and Jason Statham. It was kind of the introduction to this sort of somewhat kind of Guy Ritchie kind of started to turn into a genre all his own.
Yeah, and there's lots of rip-offs right now.
But we'll get to that towards the end, I think. But right now I will talk about the movie itself. Starting with the plot, I will try my best.
Good luck on that one.
This plot is notoriously complicated.
Yes.
A plot that can probably only be understood fully with about 20 or 25 multiple viewings, repeat viewings.
And lots of alcohol, probably.
It starts with the four friends. You have... Let me make sure I'm pointing at the right people. You have Jason Fleming, Jason Statham, Nick Moran, and Dexter Fletcher as Tom, Bacon, Eddie, and Soap, respectively. And they all are friends who are putting money together so that Eddie can take part in a big-ass card game with enormous stakes with a deadly crime boss named Hatchet Harry. Why somebody would do something this stupid, I guess is where the tagline comes from.
Yep.
And for some reason they expect this to go well, but of course, Hatchet Harry actually cheats. And Eddie ends up owing him £500,000. I'm not quite sure what that translates to us, but £500,000, which is still apparently a big deal because Eddie goes outside and pukes multiple times. And basically they have to come up with an idea to pay him back without having to have Eddie's dad, played by Sting, sell his beloved bar to pay off the debt. That seems simple enough, but that's only the first plot.
Yep.
There is a second plot involving Hatchet Harry's ploy to get these two antique shotguns that are worth a shitload of money. So he basically hires his right-hand man, Barry the Baptist, who is one of my favorite characters in the movie. He's called Barry the Baptist because he drowns people. Unfortunately, the guy that played him died right afterwards, and the movie's dedicated to him. But they hire these two idiotic criminals to steal these shotguns. That doesn't go as planned. And then we kind of circle back around to the first plot where it just so happens that the four friends, the apartment they live in, the walls are really thin, and right next door you can hear the criminals next door and all the shit that they're doing. So they get the idea to rob those guys. And in true, what would be Guy Ritchie fashion, all of this eventually turns into one giant clusterfuck. And there's pretty much nobody that comes out of it fortunate.
Yeah.
Except for Sting, I guess, because he gets to keep his bar. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people, I'll go ahead and go into this now, I was going to wait till later, but obviously when Lock, Stock came out, all of the critics jumped on the fact that he was ripping off Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have those, it's an extremely violent movie that's always, all the violence is punctuated by comedy, and it's very flashy, and sometimes especially the great scene in Snatch, where Boris the Blade gets hit by the car, and then milk and stuff, the fractured timeline, which isn't a constant, necessarily. It's a lot more in Tarantino movies than it is in Guy Ritchie, but as Tarantino's biggest fan, I don't really watch Guy Ritchie movies and think Tarantino. I watch Guy Ritchie movies and think Guy Ritchie movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's his own. He may be heavily inspired by Tarantino. He was also heavily inspired by what was the name of that movie with Bob Hoskins? Oh shit. He was really heavily inspired by movies that weren't Tarantino, supposedly. So,
You're not talking about Unleashed, are you?
No, this is an older movie. It was one of it was like Bob Hoskins' like first big thing.
Okay.
And it was a movie a lot like this.
All right.
I can't believe the name escapes me. The names never escape me.
No.
And the way the dialogue is, a lot of people complain about the accents, but if you know, watch the movie with subtitles, by the way. That's the easy solution. When you watch the movie with subtitles, it's a whole different, much better movie, I promise. The dialogue is insane. And I don't compare it to Tarantino either. It's like, Guy Ritchie basically created his own language, and that's what they... And I'm not just talking about the Cockney accents, I mean just the way the dialogue is written in general, and the way it's delivered by the perfect ensemble of actors he manages to... I'm not sure where he found them, since these were... A couple of them, it was their first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Dexter Fletcher's been around for a while. He's been around at least since the Rachel Papers. And I think Jason Fleming's been around plenty. And it's got plenty of memorable scenes to go along with that dialogue. And sometimes it's memorable scenes that actually have connotation with things going on, like to build up exactly how dangerous Hatchet Harry is. There is a scene where they talk about Harry runs his operation out of a sex shop. And at one point in his past, he was arguing with a guy. So he took a gigantic black dildo and beat the guy to death with it, and that is what he's known for. Apart from the hatchet portion of his name. And then there are scenes like that just have nothing to do with anything that are hilarious. Like the scene in particular where the guys are walking to the bar. Samoa Joe's is the name of the bar. I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Of course.
And obviously it's one of those hardcore bars because, you know, of where they are. Naturally. And as they're walking out of the bar, somebody completely engulfed in flames runs out of the bar screaming and runs down the street. And the guys just shrug it off and walk inside, and we never learn what that was about.
It sounds like an Edgar Wright movie.
Yeah, kind of. It's the Winchester.
Yeah.
I had to think of what the bar was called for a second. And it's one of the, we'll talk about the characters. Unfortunately, Eddie is basically the main one of the group of four, and he doesn't really stand out too much as the other guys. I guess, Tarantino gets a lot of beef for that. His main characters are never as interesting as his supporting characters.
Oh, yeah.
You have Jason Fleming, who's basically the fast talker, who basically takes care of everything, or thinks he can take care of everything. And the running joke of the movie is they keep calling him fat, and Jason Fleming is a very tall, slender man. Jason Statham, this is basically where Jason Statham got his start with, I talk about how he has a certain charm that a lot of people who only know him for his recent action movies don't really get to see. Because they know him for stuff like The Transporter, where he doesn't really have to do anything except kick people's asses.
Mm.
But he's got such a handle on this dialogue. The very first scene of the movie is him, like, conning people and just going through this dialogue like it's nothing, and he's saying it really fast, and it's completely incomprehensible, but still great. But once again, I don't know if it's because I have it on DVD and can watch it with subtitles, but I guess the accents were like something that really bothered people when it first came out. Because unless you have subtitles, you can't understand a fucking thing anybody is saying. Which I think almost might be a joke in itself, on purpose. So, which obviously comes back in Snatch.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you have, my favorite character is probably Soap, because kind of also playing off his normal characters, as particularly in the Rachel Papers, Dexter Fletcher is very good at playing these. he's the one guy that wants everything to be legal, and he doesn't really want to get into trouble, and he intentionally took a job that wasn't in crime because it's just not his scene. And then suddenly they're talking about the robbery, and he's the one that shows up with the ski masks. And then he's like, well, I thought we robbed them with these, and he has, like, this whole array of knives. And then, just from out of nowhere, I don't even know where it came from, he whips out a machete. He's like, this should be good. And he's got, like, this, it's almost like he's got, there's this one particular scene where he basically goes off on how the robbery is going to go down, and what they're going to have to do to get out. And it's almost like he has this really seasoned, seen some shit past.
Yeah.
And the guys are totally oblivious to it. How long they've known him, they've never realized this about him, apparently. So I've always loved that character for that. Now, of course, we have Big Chris and his son, who are Vinnie Jones and some kid. And they're basically called in by Sting, I think. As this is where the plot started to get really fucking... Nobody knows what the fuck's going on anymore. He's basically called in as an enforcer to basically take care of everything and get the guns and do all that.
Okay.
Hence this picture. And once again, apparently, Vinnie Jones was best known for being like a really, really brutal soccer player.
Yeah.
Or football player, if you want to go native. And he came in and he's actually like this really charming, badass character. Which basically turned into the rest of the charming, badass characters he's played for Guy Ritchie. But you do what you do best. And that's what he does best. And it works through the whole movie. Mind you, it does have a lot of great scenes. Like, the Bren gun scene is great, too. Mm-hmm. The thing where they, the constant theme of, the guy is very paranoid about the security in his apartment, how he doesn't want anybody in, so much so that he has a cage in front of the front door. And he gets really paranoid whenever somebody's let in, even if it's somebody they know personally. And that gets out of control. And the character of Gloria, that everybody thinks is, like, always stoned out or completely unconscious. And she's the one that, like, comes alive and shoots everybody. And shoots the place up. It's worth noting that a name who wasn't recognizable back then is recognizable now. The producer on both of these movies is Matthew Vaughn.
Nice.
Who you might know as the director of Kick-Ass and X-Men First Class, which explains Jason Fleming and Dexter Fletcher's brief parts in Kick-Ass. Jason Fleming was the bodyguard that was there when Hit Girl went in and infiltrated, and Dexter Fletcher was Cody, the guy they compacted in the car.
Vinnie Jones was the Juggernaut.
Yeah. That's Brett Ratner's movie, though.
Still an X-Men connection, though.
Yeah, I don't think Matthew Vaughn would have put the Juggernaut in his movie.
I don't either.
And Matthew Vaughn also has a cameo as the guy that, the character Dog, who's another antagonist, steals the car from. And that's another great scene is, that basically describes Vinnie Jones's characters to it too, is, he's finally had enough of Dog. So, once again, it's incomprehensible unless you have the subtitles. It's actually in IMDb's trivia what he says, because you can't hear it. Something along the lines of, he's screaming at Dog, and he's got his head in between the car and a car door, and he's smashing it over and over again, and killing him. And he's screaming at him. And what the subtitles say, if you can hear it, when you read the subtitles, you can actually hear him saying it, and it doesn't sound as incomprehensible. He's basically saying, like, Dog, nobody has ever been as rude to me as you are.
Nice.
So yeah, and the great ending. This big, it all comes to an end with, everything is done. All the antagonists are dead. All the criminals are dead. Basically, the last people standing are the four friends, Sting, and Big Chris, and his son. And Big Chris has the money, and Jason Fleming has the guns that he took at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Big Chris shows up and gives him the bag and says, "Here's your money." And they send Jason Fleming off to get rid of the guns because it's like the last thing they need to get away with everything. So Jason Fleming's at the bridge, and he's throwing the guns off the bridge, and he's getting ready to walk away. Then they open the bag of money, and it's empty. But the only thing in it is basically the handbook for the rifles, or the shotguns. So they open it, and they realize that the guns are worth more than anybody ever realized. So they absolutely need them. And that's how they can get all their money back. And of course, as luck would have it, Jason Fleming realizes that the guns didn't go all the way off the bridge. They're on a ledge. So he starts to climb over the ledge. So to basically hold on, he puts his cell phone in his mouth. So they call up Jason Fleming to say, don't drop the guns. And the very last shot of the movie is Jason Fleming. He has a hold of the pole to where he won't fall, that's on the bridge, with one hand. He's reaching for the guns with the other hand, and his cell phone's going off in his mouth. Nice. And the movie just ends there. And it seems like one of those intentionally endings, but I've always loved that ending.
Definitely.
It's actually a pretty easy ending to get out of. It's just a matter of which decision he made. Which we will never know. So, he could have pushed the guns off the ledge, or he could have just reached up and answered his phone. So, yeah. But, having said all of that, we have Snatch.
Yes.
Which is, I think, actually a lot more like mainstream and well-known than Lock, Stock is.
It was the introduction to Guy Ritchie for me.
Yeah.
And most people I know.
Usually it's one right after the other. Like, if you were introduced to Snatch first, the person that probably told you about it says, oh, by the way, there's also this movie. And
Yep.
the other way, if it was the other
Mallrats and Clerks. That's how it was for me.
Now, the interesting thing here is, as great as Snatch is, there's one thing you have to say. To be totally honest, going from Lock, Stock to Snatch, Guy Ritchie does not really do anything different.
No.
It's the exact same style, it's the exact same tone. If you didn't know any better and you caught one of those without knowing which one it was, it'd probably take a while to realize which one. And if you were to watch, it's very believable to suggest they're in the same universe, too.
Oh, easily.
Obviously a fantastic double feature, that goes without saying.
For sure.
But the plot for this one is different. They're obviously much like Lock, Stock, obviously. Snatch has multiple plots going. But I'd say Snatch, I would say a big reason Snatch is the more accessible one is because it, despite all its plots, it's a lot easier to follow than Lock, Stock is. At least I think so. Your main plots involved, the opening is, well, technically we open with Turkish, basically talking about, he's basically building up the setup for how we got to where he is now. And during the opening credit scene, we go into this big diamond robbery performed by Frankie Four Fingers, who is Benicio del Toro. And one of my favorite performances of his, and he's in the movie for like 3 minutes.
Yep.
And then this diamond basically sets off everything. Because the parallel stories we have Turkish and Tommy, who is Jason Statham and Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham is now mainly known for playing Capone on Boardwalk Empire. But when Boardwalk Empire came on, I was like, hey, it's Tommy from Snatch. And they basically, it's mainly Turkish as wrestling.
Sorry.
Is a boxing promoter. And his boss is a ruthless motherfucker named Bricktop.
Yes.
I forgot to mention this. It's worth noting the guy that plays Bricktop in Snatch is the narrator for Lock, Stock. And basically the plan is to have their fighter Gorgeous George throw the fight. And Bricktop will make money off of it. As will the people that Bricktop has informed of this. Thus making everything go well for everybody. Well, they end up in the middle of a campsite inhabited by pikeys, who are basically run by Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt's Mickey. And in a humorous joke at his audiences for Lock, Stock, Guy Ritchie thought it would be hilarious after all the complaints he got that nobody can understand a word of anybody in Lock, Stock, to have characters in Snatch that nobody understands.
Yep. So,
thus, Mickey and the Pikeys were born. It's worth noting the guy that's always there with Mickey is also Jason Fleming from Lock, Stock. In obviously a much lesser part. And Mickey ends up getting into a fight with Gorgeous George and knocking him out. Almost killing him. So, a furious Bricktop tells them that they have to do something about this fight. So they convince Mickey to do the fight for them, but he has to throw the fight.
Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction.
Yes. The trouble with that is Mickey has a particular punch where he only has to throw it once and the guy's not getting up. And sometimes he does it by accident.
Yep.
I love the look on Brad Pitt's face after the first fight goes wrong and he just knocks the guy out with one punch and he looks at Turkish and goes... and he's really happy about it too. He doesn't realize the gravity of the situation he has caused. So, now it turns out that Frankie Four Fingers is a compulsive gambler, which always gets him into trouble. That's why he only has 4 fingers on one hand. And it's this hilarious running joke where every time they so much say the word Vegas or gambling around Frankie Four Fingers, there's this flash on screen where it plays the song Viva Las Vegas, and it's various pictures of Frankie in Vegas losing a whole bunch of gambling winnings. That also takes place in a really... There's also those little moments like in that scene where Frankie's on the phone and he's talking to Doug the Head at this point, I think, and he's getting like measured for a suits. And it's really quick cuts. Like we cut to Frankie, then we cut to Doug the Head, and then we cut back to Frankie, and so on. And every time we cut back to Frankie, he's wearing a completely different suit.
Yeah.
Sometimes with a hat, sometimes without a hat, and they just appear. Sometimes with a cigar, sometimes without a cigar. Now, of course, all of this is a setup by Boris the Blade. Because Boris the Blade knows that if Frankie bets on the boxing fight that's about to happen, something is going to go terribly wrong. Because basically what it all comes down to is everybody wants the diamond that is in Frankie's possession. Most notably Cousin Abby, who is Dennis Farina, who is my favorite person in this movie. Even more so than Mickey. Makes you really miss Dennis Farina, too.
I always will.
And then you have a bunch of side characters, a whole bunch of memorable side characters. That's, unfortunately, as much as I like the movie, that's something you can't necessarily say about Lock, Stock. Lock, Stock, it's really hard to keep track of everybody. All the supporting characters in Snatch are memorable. Particularly, there's a trio of criminals that are Saul, Vince, and Tyrone. And they are these idiot robbers who basically try to rob Bricktop's bookies. And all shit breaks loose. And all this shit is happening at the same time. It's much easier to follow than it is. It's much easier to watch and follow than it is to explain. And all these plots come together. And of course, there is the introduction of Bullet Tooth Tony.
Yes.
Who's hired by Cousin Abby to take care of this. Who I like. I love Bullet Tooth Tony even more than I love Big Chris. It is kind of sad, though, that... I mean, obviously it's played for laughs, and it is funny when it happens, but after all the build... And I know that's the point. After all the build-up, Tony's death is very disappointing. Basically, the dog... I think it's when the dog gets a hold of the diamond. Something is going on with the dog, and Abby just starts shooting at it everywhere. And we don't even see where he's firing. He's just firing the gun everywhere, and then he chases the dog, and the dog gets away. And then he's like, come on, Tony, we gotta go get the dog.
Nope.
And then he slowly walks back in, realizing what he's done. Tony? And then there's the great running joke that goes all the way to the end, where every time Abby goes from one place to the other, it's this montage of a taxi door shutting, him taking a shot on the plane taking off, the plane landing, his passport getting stamped, and him getting into a taxi. And this happens 3 times. One of which immediately follows him accidentally killing Tony. And then the whole, do you have anything to declare? Yeah, don't go to England. I could go on all day about how much I love Cousin Abby's character.
Yes.
I love when he first goes to see Doug the Head, because he realizes he's the only one that really knows about Frankie's gambling problem and how it's a bad idea for him to learn about the fight. So he's really mad that Doug the Head told Frankie about the fight, because this is Boris fucking everything up.
Yeah.
As soon as this montage happens and Abby gets to Doug the Head's office, the very first thing he says is, "Sit down and shut up, you big bald fuck." In that perfect Dennis Farina delivery that he was known for.
Yes. Watch Big Trouble.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah,
Other people have seen it.
There's a very similar one in Big Trouble that there is in this with, after the car wreck has happened, with the fractured timeline scene where we see the same scene happen 3 times. Where there are car wrecks and Boris manages to tumble out of the car and stumble into the street right before he's hit by Saul's car.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Boris?
Yeah.
And he's just stumbling around the streets with a bag on his head and his hands tied, not knowing where the fuck he is. And speaking of abrupt deaths, they finally get Frankie with the case attached to him. And there's the humorous scene where they have to cut his arm off because the case is attached to him. And Boris just nonchalantly shoots Frankie in the face while he's wearing a tea cozy on his head. I guess so he can't see anything. It's basically because everybody that runs into this room has to ask, "Oh, why does he have a tea cozy on his head?" It's like Snatch's what smells like shoe polish. And that also involves the great scene with Bricktop where he talks about he has this really long one-take monologue about how to dispose of a body using pigs. How you feed them to pigs, and it usually takes about 16 of them to do it right. Which I guess also is a roundabout way of threatening them, too.
Yeah.
So, I would say it's a lot better. Obviously, both of these are a lot better than his more recent output.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think A Game of Shadows was the last Guy Ritchie movie I saw that I really liked.
Yeah, same here.
Because the first Sherlock Holmes was okay.
Mm.
I didn't care for Rock and Roll, and I really didn't care for Revolver. They're basically just shadows of these movies that aren't living up to them.
Then there's rip-offs like Layer Cake.
Which was by Matthew Vaughn, so
yeah.
Technically, you know. It's got, there's a lot of scenes in Snatch that I love. That's basically what I'm saying here is that I prefer Snatch to Lock, Stock.
Mm-hmm.
Snatch just kind of feels less messy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a lot, like I said, I remember all the supporting characters, not so much in Lock, Stock. And it's got a lot more memorable scenes. Like, I can point out to you a couple of scenes in Lock, Stock that stand out, but there's so many scenes in Snatch, like a lot of the ones we've talked about, plus, I really love the scene with, when they figure out that, they basically rat out, they figure out through the security footage that Tyrone was involved with the robbing of the bookies. So, Bricktop hunts him down, and it goes simultaneously with the scene where, they're at the campsite, and they're, basically doing the thing where the Pikeys have this thing where they have dogs chase a hare, and if the hare it just depends on who you bet on. If the dogs catch the hare and kill it, then, and so on. And if the hare gets away, then somebody else gets what they want. And this is where the Periwinkle Blue caravan comes in. And they play these scenes at the same time where Tyrone is getting chased by Bricktop's guys as the dogs are chasing the hare. And then as the hare is about to get caught by them is when Bricktop is sicking his dogs on Tyrone. It's a really, really well done scene. And one of my favorite movie scenes ever, the Pikey Revenge ending. with Oasis is fucking in the bushes play.
You know it.
That whole scene is just fucking awesome. And probably one of the biggest payoff endings in a long time. Since it came out in 2000, 14 years ago. Wow. And the performances in Snatch are great too. They're good in Lock, Stock, but they're really, really good in Snatch. So yeah, overall, I would definitely pick Snatch.
Same here.
And also, Lock, Stock is one of those movies that I really only watch every now and then. I could watch Snatch all the time.
I used to, actually. We didn't even talk about Bullet Tooth Tony with the Lucky Star.
Yeah.
Dragging him by his tie.
I love this track. That's you and Bremner, by the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Nothing against Lock, Stock, but nothing against Lock, Stock at all, but I can say that I absolutely 100% prefer Snatch.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not really even a competition at all.
Nah, I didn't think it was going to be.
So, yeah, but they're both, good for their different reasons.
Definitely.
Lock, Stock is good. I happen to think Snatch is great.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
So that's pretty much that.
So next week, I got an idea what we're doing next week. So we'll, I think we're gonna go to war next week. Actually, I think that's the best way to put it, and that's how we're gonna end it. So AJ, any parting words for this versus?
That's it.